Hello, hear your name, black pupils, through your R's. Attend. I am not a journalist. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a police form. We are the nature of debate. People calling each other names. For example, those all they're doing is making fake sides. There are fake sides of issues with instances, descriptions at all locations, areas, and states tied to whole predicate acts with facts, methods, identity theft, fraud, slander, roles. They are recorded themselves, the intelligence community of Connecticut, interstates and internationally. They lie about what they think about people speaking about the past because they put us in fake ties and fake natures of ties to the kids around us. I only have love for you guys growing up. There are people in the background associated increasingly with the Debbie Gold who did little tricks to put fake things in databases, sequence shifts, fake ties, fake natures of ties between me and her and others. Increasingly, I don't even know the names of. Increasingly, people with a whiting forensics tied to leaders of the kids involved with their manipulations. They have more kids and leaders of the schools, including mothers, in other words, and their kids involved. Everyone speaking through others with playing games because they have all sides in criminal and civil cases already locked. And the courts names at the same time, intelligence, foreign and domestic, names at the crime scenes, at or next to the campuses, all kinds of predicate acts. They change fake digital evidences because they're planting sequence shifts and they're playing the sense and sensibilities, for example, as a phrase per the dictionary definition of it. But that we can observe that they have sense and sensibilities they can't observe, they can't afford to have discerned properly with any English authors said had relative to this because people didn't have free speech because slavery was still entrenched sickly distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, and that had been sustained before America's founders were born, and there were laws against every single person regarding the torture, extortion, fact-keeping nature, slavery of everyone's therefore physical. Our founders had declassified things about their words that we have left out. They declassified things about how they forced the Declaration of Independence. They forced the Constitutional Convention for us to get said that we need the Constitution unabridged. We have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. Now, say for example, like there was a television show and they wanted to send the judge into a prison and see what it was like. Because don't forget, these are people that have been speaking about crimes as a certain type of victim slash hyper victim. Same per the same method that has the suburbs that were designed before America's founders were born. All kinds of ways. And let alone the cities. Little kids in suburbs, they know it's unnatural. They sense that we can build way better. In other words, and they didn't in colonial times before, they even had cars, let alone trucks, cranes, boats, airplanes. All this energy towards weapons. The best way to secure peace is not especially when it comes down to mutually assured destruction. The best way to secure peace is nature itself is showing us the difference between hyper peace and peace. And it's showing us if we start acting to appreciate the hyper peace, we have to begin with the sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, at countries A through Z, at locations, areas, and states A through Z. Any voice not entertaining what has been entertained as quality aspect slash S, in fact, should be nature as criminal insidiousness nature slash hyper criminal insidiousness. Mass wrongdoers, just with predicate acts with facts, relativity, just with the opinions regarding black pupils, whites of eyes, and the relativity of it, the value of it. Where value is value as nature slash nature is value. distinctly from how it is. Nature is value slash value is nature. For example, how we could discern that identity, that is also the one. That is why and how. The other species bodies have two eyes. They have quality slash they have aspects in nature that is distinct, but it is also non-distinct, and it is simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously. And I say slash because nature, when we appreciate it as it is asking, showing us to appreciate it as the ancients did demonstrably, it is functional how it is a distinct identity, not just of a simultaneous nature, as a distinct identity of hyper simultaneous nature, but a distinct identity of hyper invisible, but still discernible. Nature, because it's only an extent of its complete identity that we could discern. But wherever we have the extent of it that is discernible with any subject, individually grouped or together, its identity, complete identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that is inseparable from the parts of that smallest finite part, group parts, and simultaneously parts. But there is also a slash hyper simultaneous if we are being shown, and how it is functional, how it has distinct parts of its complete body. Like this is exactly what we are discerning when we look through a microscope at for example, tomato cells, because they're basically almost transparent. In other words, so you could discern the chloroplast manifests as a cell body, but manifests with distinctions, and that also come with discernment of the value of discernment of a cell nucleus, a cell body, and the cell wall slash S, which we could discern through the microscope connected, and the water and its elements. Also, per what we don't see, we could discern this when we use correlation slash hypercorrelation, because there is an identity. In other words, that is greater than all the other, like the identities of correlation, or the identity of correlation itself. In other words, with the extent of the all space slash existence, the identity, the extent of the identity we can discern of it, it shows us the difference between truths. For example, that can be used for lies, or to screen lies, or to screen motivations, which is one of the phenomena. That the breaching method, one of the phenomena that the breaching method set up to hide behind, because it rolls with our motivations. For example, just the fact that a human fact-cheating nature breaching method is one of the things that is true always, that breaching, that nature itself, and that our founders communicated for us to understand. So the only way that anyone could pretend that's debatable and get away with it is by self-valuing. Collusion slash S, being and having been. Where and how you, rolls with self-value use slash S of our founders' words, leaving out what they declassified about that. Leaving out with the breaching method. They could communicate for us to understand about was entrenched. Replacing that value with other values, with convictions, by short words in their protraction, even descriptions of logic and reason and justifications of it, they stand on blame. Increasingly, names on and off the Wethersfield. The only time I ever saw a Stephen Stocko at a Wethersfield campus was in a math class, and I never had a word of conversation with him. He was repeatedly harassed but it was proofs that they placed a Pausano and my neighbor Ray Colo in my class because they were needing to carry on my progressions because there is roles with databases used criminally foreign influenced at each of the campuses I went to and names next to it who are attached to fake. They made fake. Some of them made fake exceptions of ties to me. They can look like actors, so other people can make a fake exception, pretend I don't realize. Increasingly tied to a Valley Crest in Wethersfield, and people with the town offices and retired mayors. Increasingly, people had conversations with town mayors that included my name, who increasingly have roles with conversations tied to body dumping spots. And people in my grammar school that I never even had conversations with, like a Sal Civiello, they tried to make a fake exception 2 times at his house per them. And I didn't even respond. He does not know. In other words, his neighbors are increasingly involved with different body dumping spots and people at and next to the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, involved also with mayors and with a whole bunch of different countries involved with different differences rackets and the identity theft, fraud, slander method against everyone sickly distinctly. And everyone forced to blame other things, others, ourselves, or sensing for the breaching method. This breaching method understood how algorithms work and reassigned the database's structure and the identities of relativity to ourselves with the identity of hyperrelativity. That which is hyper native pure, no. You don't even have to be Native American to be able to discern. In other words, we have to have a re-education of America too, because not only did campuses A through Z make the same mistake in self-value roles with nature's demonstrations of it and of the breaching method simultaneously, it consciously maintains those demonstrations being and having been blamed on other things, others, ourselves, and that self-defended. It is tied to where and to how. There are suits and ties, counters and exceptions that have left also out with how from America to Russia to Ukraine, the suburbs look and are on that scale and nature that was designed before America's founders were born, with slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. And again, I read, and nature itself shows us that we're supposed to value and explain and understand James Madison as our founder. And the founders behind him wanted themselves to be recognized as him as our founder. Because, for example, they knew that people wouldn't, they are still doing it. In other words, so president they were the first president. So he's technically George Washington's technically a founder too. George Washington is technically a founder too, but also as a president, he's the first one who agreed to use James Madison's plan and to work with those behind him. And this was to work to begin to start a country where they all had to hide their roles with the audacity of being behind what we get to be said that to us informally that we should get the Constitution unabridged. It was highly criminal. If we set up the acting the way I want to do with the programming, make a virtual programming. I have to give up this idea because in other words, I'll donate pantheism. You guys listen. But you have to listen because each side has guilt together where we could discern the breaching method's roles. There are not just criminal foreign influences at countries A through Z, at locations, areas, states A through Z, black pupils. We have black pupils' rights of eyes to discern these criminal foreign influences to discern other than the identity that projects why and how the other species bodies have two eyes, distinctly but non-distinctly, simultaneously / hyper simultaneously. Pantheism is more probably and was demonstrably having been led by the identity, the distinct identity of hyper simultaneous nature. In other words, and again, I'm using the word nature for the same reason we need more than one word for a verb. In other words, and why each one of those words is about why and how it is distinctly valued to itself as the individual part of itself, as a verb, as the group parts of itself, as the gerund, as the prepositions. Not as the preposition, as the participle natures, as a past participle and as a present participle, and as a simultaneous / hyper simultaneous nature. Nature itself is projecting to us. We have the same color eyes that are black and white, while we have different color eyes at the same time. And there are exceptions. There's exception nature. Nature uses exception because it is exceptions and exception nature. The ways we know, finite, grouped, and simultaneous. But it is that identity that is further, more finite, greater than. And as the expanse / S of all those things grouped that were and will stay greater than our own, only increasing volume, even once we are gone, where value is nature / nature is value, in the opposite sequence nature, as its volume, where and how it makes more identity of forever nature of itself, an identity of forever nature, where Earth has a special difference that is hyper additional from, but some semi as our own, but then completely as our own, per its identity relationship to itself. And further, as the identity that will only appreciate that special difference one way, or it is forced from here, as forced space nature transfer, Leith of Hadith, nature being a word used for identity's volume to refer to a portion of it. In Allah's name and the Trinity, in Jesus' name. These are preservations of what we are prevented a quality of fact treatment nature. For example, that needs legitimate science, insane science regarding what is said at the beginning of the Old Testament and what is said at the beginning of the Quran. We could discern collusion / S, self-valued roles with U / S of it too, between the people who attack the religions, the people who defend the religions, and people with the exceptions in their syntax, with their language, relative to as collusion / S, with a difference racketeering method worse than war crimes, black pupils. It is time. In other words, so we have to address where, how, and why. So there are a whole bunch of demonstrations and means to discern. In other words, we could even program this a whole bunch of different ways, black pupils. We can make hyper positives out of negatives, which is distinct from making positives out of negatives. So they put, and we have to discern the difference between a hyper rat and a rat, because the interbranch overt criminal enterprises, private ones, news at the same time, all sides of criminal and civil cases, they already were shown, they already were collusions with each other. And that is used at other locations / S. There was a hyper theater there is a singular hyper shell slash S that is tactical ulterior from that which is nature's hyper shell slash S. In other words, black people here. In other words, we have in one of the for some of the movies and for some of the shows, we need actors who we're going to switch the colors. We also need actors internationally because this is about the science part of it. See, real science should only feel like games slash games, or else we sense. See, but this breaching method inverted how perception works relative to, in other words, descriptions and perception appreciation of what is positive or negative. Because everyone has missed roles with use slash S of all that self-value, right, where, and how no one self-values those things. But right, where, and how. For example, where there is groupthink with our group communications platforms, there's still criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality aspects, nature, and tactical delusions, because they wouldn't be and have been manifest so long. So in other words, Judge Napolitano's, I asked him many times because they're using wire crimes and mail crime methods, Wethersfield police and their sources. They have a whole bunch of different police departments with them involved with that, with them switching and forging names and making confessions and faking conversations and ties to me since I was a kid. I never had a conversation with the police at the police station at Auburn when I was a kid. And they never, in other words, they wanted me to go there and I didn't. The kids that they wanted me to go there with, in other words, they made it, they just put the kid next to Ray Cololo, who's one of the ones involved with Phil Cololo, further involved with the intelligence communities, families, and with medical and sexual offenders of kids proven through time and further involved. People involved on my street with violence and they're communicating through others, non-verbally communicating, confirming that they communicate that way. A whole bunch of people from other areas, the connections to spots next to them too. U/S critically pointed as ones involved with the World Trade Center attack and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants, their neighbors, their family members, also involved with this. They are and have been attaching everyone and everyone around them to fake and changed communications per U/S of that have nothing to do with what they pretended. We're going to examine how anyone at Country's 858 pretended they could have integrity, speak for integrity, leaving out all the hyper-archaeological evidences and leaving out how they can't discern where and how we have three natures of America's founders that are critical to nature's demonstrating this to us too. And three ways the Native Americans are part of this group. One way, they are that agreed and understood that there was a breaching method that had been sustained. And everyone was already tortured, extorted, and packed human nature enslaved. Therefore, physically, everyone was in a trap. Everyone's sense and sensibilities of everyone around everyone was already being and haven't been employed to hurt people and or to help them as collusion, because the breaching method itself needed its identity and relativity to itself, ourselves, itself, and itself to be not discerned. And every identity has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. This is one of the things that we are shown by nature itself, where how it shows us how values internal and external. And, as the quality of diffusion has value. Again, there's a difference between there's nature itself we could use. I'm not even a lawyer. There's a difference between criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments or facts treatments, like pretending that politics have value. They don't. You know, in other words, and when uses of words like attack or support, you know, all they're doing is forcing that quality of fact treatment nature that is criminal insidiousness and that can't defend itself and afford not to screen. The roles with U/S of that also relative to where and to how we could discern all kind of things with this hyper programming tied to how other is being and have been communicated for our founders and they communicated. And as roles, needs, and natures using their words, leaving out what they communicated about that through declassified and through other means that we could discern it, black pupils. We're taught to get properly to get the Constitution unabridged and to recognize, as I learned through Judge Napolitano, as nature shows us itself too. We have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. Increasingly, so there were ongoing people that planted evidence on all sides of my house, all from other areas, and they also have roles next to religious spots, and with people who spoke things in like that about that, where increasingly, see the difference between overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and how foreign and domestic intelligence, because together they demonstrated how they have time collusions intercities with that. There is a conscious possession /s. There are functions by predicate acts typed into databases and acting tied to it, relative to where and to how there is an identity theft /fraud /slander method clearer than day against us. A Leahy family and various judges' family members by a Rick Ciampaglione and a Tim O'Brien and an Andrew O'Brien and their mother non-verbally. They have roles with people named Cololo, with wire crimes and falsified police, also per the police themselves. But these are also police that faked conversations with me. These are also people that are forcing people to speak as groups because they're hiding evidences regarding that's one of the things they do as rules of predicate acts against people of all ages, because the same ones I recorded involved with time use /s and collusions with other natures of organized crime at the same time with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, and people tied to them. The same families had time use /s of elderly homes involved and of spots next to them. Increasingly, there are 3 spots at the end of the Berlin Turnpike involved with a whole bunch of medical corruption involved with state police, families, interstates, and with FBI. And as ones involved with retired Wethersfield police chiefs, a police chief Cintron, per his sources and per his police department, there's a Jessica Cintron. I never met her, and I don't know her and her educators from the past, and her kids involved with a Reno Mazzucato, and with they're making family members speak about family members to hide with their fake things they put in databases. They have something to do with whiting forensics on all along Route 175. They have rules of predicate acts increasingly with a child sex offender. That they had roles with the principal child abuser, with way worse than that, with medical offenders. There's a Leahy family who faked conversations with me and with females in their family and others at Hartford Hospital. They put me in fake conversations with themselves, and they lied about the outcome of legal cases, also with WFSB, while they were forcing the principal child abuser and roles with wire crime acts and methods and mail crime acts and methods and digital crime acts and methods. They're changing and faking the digital evidences There were a whole bunch of investigators tied to Superior Court people of New Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts that are increasingly involved with predicate acts with people at the judicial branch offices and spots next to it, like a Wethersfield pizza house. I never had a word of conversation with Stephen Stocko when he was in a math class with me when I was in high school. And a Paul Zane and a Ray Clough, they were put in that class to influence to constantly harass him in that class. And I had no communications at all in that class with Paul Zano and Ray Clough. In other words, still we didn't, I'm minding my business, even though Ray Clough is my neighbor. The police brought in the name Clough, but they didn't put the whole name. But a Phil Clough is increasingly involved with predicate acts on my street with people from other areas involved with child offenders, sexual and medical, and his roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders. I never had a class with a Phil Clough in my life. I never saw him on the inside of a campus in my life. I only saw him one time on the outside of the campus, on the side of the school with people who planted evidences. They walk next to you and they make someone try to take a picture and put fake ties to you with the other kids, all as ones tied to the intelligence families near me, involved with wire crimes, the Wethersfield police, forging and switching names, and with the courts, so we could easily settle this because they put fake and changed digital evidences too as collusions, because there were body dumping spots, murders, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and names next to the body dumping spots that they brought up at the same time. Because they don't even know they brought they want to go about who said what. And some they also switch subjects, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. So get me out of the fake conversations with the Mendez police, because they're at the Wethersfield Police Department, has roles at and next to Fox Connecticut News, with people also at and next to WFSB and at and next to WTNH, involved with all kinds of predicate acts with fax methods. Increasingly, people also with probate court judges sickly distinctly because of their roles with elderly homes and torture methods that keep there's too much at once for them to say, and there's relative to the torture. In other words, standing the suburbs were designed for this torture method against the clearer than day against the people of New York City, of Hartford as a suburban / urban. And the difference between that too was employed by the breaching method. Our debates, our agreements, our differences used by the breaching method measured and maintained self-valued roles with styles of logic and natures of logic, tactical ulterior from how nature communicates with us, how it keeps us bound, species body. Showing that with the other species bodies of individual bodies. All group differences are being demonstrated for its system, but we're not following it, so it is forcing it from here, lethal IDs. More and more, the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, accidents when they speak jobs. See, these people have to self-value. Uses of definitions and the value and or the value of voting, things like voting, differences. Tactical ulterior from what our founders used to that could defend that and afford discern that quality of fact, human nature that our founders forced us to reveal. Vaccines. I teach us things, but long. Because you guys A through Z came through campuses, came through uses of those differences, of those similarities, tactical ulterior from what our founders communicated. We appreciate things together. You guys don't, in other words, okay, thank you. And for the republic for which we stand. But we have to bring this nature to it. And we have to, when we start doing this properly, we're going to discern the nature of it and then the complete identity of a human factory nature breaching method. and it rolls with it clearer than day. Self-value, even though no one wants it naturally self-value. You guys are all a bunch of theaters at locations, areas, and states that are jumping into other people's conversations dishonestly when they mention things that predicate acts, like reassigning what black and white communicate by nature when nature is not criminal insidious in its nature. It wants us to discern this and communicate about this. Black people. So Connecticut Interbranch has been switching and forging names and roles with databases used functionally by a breaching method, the same way they describe how programming languages work. But then further hyper additionally, and this being relative to where and to how, the syntax, in other words, practical reason with each of the industries. And you can't understand your industry if you can't appreciate the breaching methods employment of such differences. Of economies themselves, individually grouped and together, all differences with that, as systems tactical from nature's. In other words, it needs to hide behind this. Better than free, we can do things. To change, in other words, we can make and save more energy, lifting and then dropping in beautiful ways. Water. See, but we're going to have to change the nature of all the industries at once. And we have to bring, except for, medicine and healthcare, except for we're going to have to, at the same time, that's involved with a whole bunch of natures of organized crime. Criminally foreign. The reasons we need experts, people have degrees, that reason was as inverted and now used as their roles with scams. More scams with a couple dozen people than there are streets in Hartford and houses on them involved with Hartford Hospital and the houses next to them and the businesses next to them, like Tomorrow's Market, where they were then and now. Ilo's Kitchen. These are also next to Buckley High School. These are little rat traps with culture and differences too. Black pupils. See, black pupils, whites of eyes. This is projecting to us how to speak about culture. We take it unabridged. In other words, otherwise you're a criminal insidiousness nature. In other words, but we have a whole bunch of criminal insidiousness natures that blame on other things, others ourselves, for what our founders communicated for us to blame. Things like slavery on, which is the human fact, tribute nature breaching method, as a torture, extortion, slavery method. You guys won't even allow that honest about what George Washington communicated about what he said through what was declassified, let alone James Madison, the founders behind him, who then went and got George Washington to agree to use that plan, which then unfolded, which really caused the Declaration of Independence, the American Revolution, and the Constitution. That's still abridged at ground as nature. And with all perspective to come, black sings. I teach us things but long.